We are now starting our webinar on case management. I am Michael Santos, and I know that many of you, I recognize many of the names that are on here, but there are probably some people that are new. Just to start off, I want to welcome everybody and make sure that everybody remembers there's no question that we're not going to answer. So if you have any questions about any phase of the criminal justice system, please feel free to either unmute yourself, or if it's easier, if you want to wait a little while, just raise your hand. There is a segment on the bottom, I think it's under reactions, where you could put that hand up there, and we'll know that you want to communicate, and to just raise your hand. It's under the reactions at the bottom of the screen. There's also a section that says chat on the bottom, at least on my screen. I'm on a Mac. I don't know if you're on a Mac or a PC, but please feel free to ask anything. Several of my partners are on the call itself, and I'm going to ask them to respond to the chats if I'm in the middle of presenting, or I get lost because I can't both monitor the chats and simultaneously focus on what I wanted to present today. There in the chat, I just dropped in there a link, and that link is will take you to the PowerPoint that I created. That page is already live. Obviously, it doesn't have the video or the audio file attached yet, but it will have the video and audio attached by late this afternoon. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as we start today talking about the importance of understanding case management. As I said, it's on this window right here, on this screen right here. You'll also be able to see it right there under the blog, because I published it yesterday just in anticipation of today, and it shows up right here. So we'd click that link, and that'll take us already to the PowerPoint slides that are showing up right here. I think even before I get into this, I want to talk a little bit about a couple of people that have really benefited from understanding this concept of unit management. And we're going to talk a little bit about prison reform movements and how they apply to you. But before we get there, it's important for me to share some victories when people have a victory. And one of the fellows that was on our, has been a part of this same program earlier, he had a relatively short sentence. And well, the sentence was 8 months. So I think that's relatively short. But he was successful in advocating for himself and getting released on the CARES Act. He just got that news this week. So we're always really excited when people take some of the information that we offer in here and use it to their advantage. But it's one of the reasons that we always emphasize it's really important to ask questions, because a lot of the things that I'm going to be discussing are really complicated. It's like learning a different language. And every webinar, I always suggest that you spend more time on the Prison Professor's website, which is our real educational advocacy website to try and help people. And you'll see that it's kind of hard. It takes a real commitment just to keep up with it. Because if you look right here under the blog, you will see that there's new articles, sometimes twice a day that we're writing, or several times a day. This was yesterday. It looks like I published 3 articles. 12. The day before there were 2. It's hard to keep up with all of this information, but it's really important. It's really important because we want you to avoid the type of complexities that you would see if you were to click on this link right here, for example. You would see some of the atrocities that happen in prison, and you could just read this article right here, which shows a scathing opinion from a federal judge who held the Bureau of Prisons in civil contempt and leveled sanctions against the agency for allowing a person to die in prison. And I bring this to the attention, not necessarily, not to cast aspersions on the Bureau of Prisons, but to help members of our community understand how important it is to understand every phase of that journey. And the short story on this fella is, in my view, I don't want to say that if he'd have followed the policies that we teach, he could have gotten a better outcome, but now he's dead. This is a guy that had was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer while he was in prison. He didn't go through all the kind of procedures that we are going to be talking about on today's webinar. And as a result, he didn't get relief. They refused to let him out on CARES. And after a year, and it's stage 3 cancer that he had, according to the article and the judge's opinion, he had more than a 70% chance of recovering. But he didn't advocate as well as he could have, perhaps. And a year later, that stage 3 cancer turned into stage 4 cancer. He tried to get out on CARES again. The Bureau of Prisons opposed it. And when the Bureau of Prisons opposed it, the judge overruled the Bureau of Prisons, saying this is absurd. And the Bureau of Prisons allowed the guy to get out of prison. But the Bureau of Prisons then didn't follow the judge's order. They dumped the guy off in a wheelchair on the sidewalk at the airport while the guy was still bleeding. And he's now dead. And this is why I really emphasize you really have to understand how to advocate for yourself, because I'm not saying this to scare anybody. I'm saying this because it's not me that's saying that there are challenges and problems in the Bureau of Prisons. It's federal judges, it's U.S. senators, it's people that have gone through the system. And as somebody who went through it for a quarter century, I really want everybody to understand there are always levers. There are always opportunities that somebody can pull to advocate for themselves. But if you don't know how to do it, then you're not as strong as you could be. The fellow that I was talking about that's a part of our community, he went in there with an 8-month sentence, and he also had problems, and he also faced the same kind of resistance, but the more aggressive advocacy campaign that we were able to launch with him resulted in him getting news last week that on an 8-month sentence, he's being released after 2 months or 2.5 months or something like that. So it's very important for us to learn and to become fluent. And if you have questions on anything at all about the system, it's my hope that you will ask us those questions so that we can respond with either personal examples or what mechanisms exist that you can use to advocate for yourself. Because it's extremely important for everybody to understand you may have a lawyer representing you through sentencing, and I hope that that lawyer is helping you along the way. But once you get into beyond the sentencing hearing, sometimes lawyers don't help people understand, okay, it's on you now. You're going to have to prepare yourself to get the best possible outcome. And that's what our job is. Our job is to be with you all the way through the journey, all the way until you're done with supervised release. We can't change the past, but we can show you, hey, these are levers that you can pull to help yourself. If you don't understand how, then, it makes it harder for us to help you, because you want to go in there with your eyes wide open on what's coming and what should I do in preparation for the battles and the journey ahead. That includes spending your time in between our webinars, reading the Prison Professor's website, because that's my job, is to communicate at scale, to learn what's going on in the Bureau of Prisons, to provide commentary and analysis of what's going on, and then to disseminate that information, not only through the webinars, but also when you're in prison. And then when you have questions, you are going to respond to us through the channel that we've set up. And then members of our team, whether it's Clayton or Brian, are going to work together, or Crystal, to take your questions and give you a response based on all of this stuff that we're talking about today, based on what we know about the Bureau of Prisons. And then you have to use that information to advocate for yourself, because we can't do that for you while we're inside. We can do all the preparation for you. We can show you what to do, but the only person that has the ability to advocate for themselves once you're in that system is the person. The Bureau of Prisons is not going to listen to your lawyer, nor is a judge going to listen to anybody but you. We can't file anything for you in court, nor can we file anything for you in the BOP. What we can do is show you, hey, here's the model, here's how you do it, and then you have to execute on the plan. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because it really all starts with understanding your unit team. So now I'm going to turn to the website. Again, anybody that wants to follow along just has to go up here to the blog. They would go to the blog right there, because I know this is today's webinar, and I've already populated the page. So you would click on this page and scroll down, and this is what we're going to talk about today: is unit management and case management. Because when you get into prison, you are going to have to, what's the best way to say it? That's when you start, well, hopefully you're starting to sow the seeds for your preparations before you get there. You're starting right now by preparing yourself. But on that sheet, I'm talking about the importance of understanding what's going to happen. So what's going to happen is within 30 days, you are going to meet with a unit management team, okay? That unit team typically is going to be the main people that you need to try to influence along the way. And that always, what really goes really well in the Bureau of Prisons is courtesy and transparency, okay? Within 30 days, they're going to bring you into an office, and I need you to expect what's going to happen. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to have this very perfunctory meeting, meaning they're not that interested in you, okay? Like many other people that work in big bureaucratic agencies, they're interested in their own career and getting through the process and moving as many cogs through the bureaucracy as they possibly can. So your job at earliest stage is to start setting the stage for what you anticipate coming in the weeks and months, and for some years ahead. So it all starts with understanding, well, what happens here? During that team meeting, you're going to meet with somebody that's called a case manager. There may be a unit manager there, but I suspect that there will not be, because pretty much everybody on this panel is going either to a minimum security camp, or they're potentially going to a work cadre in a detention center. And that's kind of the same thing as a camp as far as staff resources are concerned. They're going to look at you as either minimum or low security, and they're going to say, you don't need a lot of attention. You're kind of on the self-service plan. So it's going to be a lot of check the boxes. Have I reviewed the PSR? What's your financial responsibility plan? What's your release plan? And what are you doing to influence that release plan? And most people go in there without a release plan. The only thing they're going to go in there and say is, when can I get out? So if you start your journey today by thinking about, I know what they're expecting, I know what they hear from 9 out of every 10 people that come to these initial meetings, the same question: when can I get out? Well, I'm hopeful that you will create a different plan, a more methodical plan that will show you've really have a higher level of mastery of the system before you get there. And instead of asking about when can I get out, I want you to say how you have prepared to make the most of this journey. Because look, I don't think if you're on this webinar, you probably shouldn't even be going to prison. You should be on some type of a civil sanction and not a criminal sanction. If they think you're safe enough to be in the community, then why not serve your sanction in the community? But it's not up to me to make that decision. It's up to me to help you understand the environment where you're going. And the environment where you're going, they're only going to be interested in getting their next cup of coffee and going on to their next meeting and doing whatever they do. Your job is to kind of differentiate yourself from everybody else by showing, I want to make your life better. I want to make the case manager's job easier. So we want to start off with this understanding of the entire hierarchy within the Bureau of Prisons, and what role does the case manager have? How does the case manager define success in their career? And the more you understand about how the case manager is going to be judged and how the case manager is going to advance his or her career, because that's really what they're after, is understanding his or her career. They're not so concerned about you. Then it's important to say, okay, I know what I'm going to do when I get there that first day. And that first day, I'm going to understand this whole staff hierarchy. Who works in the prison? What are their goals? How are they measuring success? And many times, people that are in our community, they come from a level of professionalism. They're either physicians, they're business leaders, they're professionals, they've had successful careers. And typically in the real world, you want to speak with a decision maker. And if you want to speak with a decision maker, you're used to trying to say, who sets the policies here? How am I going to influence that person? Well, we don't want you to do that. I don't recommend that you do that while you're in prison. I recommend that you really understand this system because it is really a bureaucracy. It is driven by policies and procedures, and every person in there is kind of jockeying themselves for a higher level within the bureaucracy. And that level in the bureaucracy, as we see here, starts with a unit team, okay? Rather an executive staff, and that's the warden and the associate warden and the executive assistant. And my recommendation is don't ever approach those people, because they're never, the only thing they're going to do for you really is look at a document. They're not going to look at you as a human being. They're always going to defer to their subordinates, and their subordinates report up, and you want to make their subordinates look good, because the warden may sign off on something, but he's going to sign off on what his subordinates tell him to do. Not going to, unless you're in a bad situation, there's really no upside in trying to lobby the warden, except I'm saying as a general rule. And in the very beginning, we're talking about the first 30 days in the institution. The first 30 days in the institution, you really want to be a submarine. You want to make sure that you're under the current of the waters. You got your periscope up so you know what's going on around you, okay? But you're not standing out. Seek first to understand before you seek to be understood, as Stephen Covey told us, okay? Go in there and say, let me open my eyes. Let me find some people who are going to be helpful to me. And you're going to find that there will be people who are going to be helpful to you immediately. Regardless of where you go, you're going to find people that look like you, think like you, talk like you, shouldn't be in prison like you. And they say, we're all here and I want to help you. So try to understand and put your head around that in the very beginning. And that's the time during those first 30 days to be asking questions, what's going on around here, not trying to change the machine. Because if you try to change the machine in the first 30 days before you really understand the machine, you're going to immediately become tarnished and targeted by the machine as this guy's a troublemaker. This guy's a muckraker. This guy's trying to get too much. He's like everybody else. He just wants to get out. Your job is to turn those, I would say, I don't want to call them adversaries, but those stakeholders, you want those people to become your advocates. And to make those people your advocates, you've got to understand their role, their duty, how they define success. How can they look better to their superiors? If you understand that, you are going to know, okay, I don't really need to try to influence the warden or the associate warden or tell them how they could run their prison better. I need to say one goal in mind. There's only one goal that we have for you. Get you back to your family at the soonest possible time. The highest level of liberty that's possible for you at the soonest possible time. You may have already been sentenced. And if you're on this process right here, we're assuming you've been sentenced. If you haven't been sentenced yet, then I know you're working with our team members to get ready for sentencing. I mean, I like to hear from people who are kind of recently in the system. Scott Laney is a part of our team, and he's got some experience. He can tell you what he did to get the outcome that he got. Scott, why don't you reveal them that story of what your sentence was, how you succeeded in getting the outcome you got?
Sure. So I was looking at a guideline range of 0 to 6 months, but the way I responded to the government wasn't necessarily ideal. I took my case to trial. I ended up with a 51 to 57 month guideline range. Worked with Michael, worked with Sam and Justin, crafted a really good narrative, good character reference letters. I was lucky to get a 42-month sentence. And on that 42-month sentence, I served 14 months. And as someone who just recently got out several months ago, I'll say, Michael, you're hitting the nail on the head with that. The case managers do not see you as a person, and you cannot treat these interactions like you would have in your prior career. You're a name, you're a number. They're focused on their career, so patience and humility and having a good release plan certainly helps.
And you heard what happened to Scott. He had a 42-month sentence. He got home in 14 months. You heard me talk about the guy that it was earlier. He had an 8-month sentence. He just got notified this week that he's getting released on CARES. Let me ask my wife, Carol, are you here? How long did Chuck serve? No, that was his sentence length. How long did he serve? So on 8 months, he's going home in about he's been notified at 2 months. It'll probably take another 2 weeks to get processed, but he's home in 2.5 months. That only happens by really understanding the system and understanding, how do I maneuver my way through that system? The fellow that I referenced at the start of the webinar, that's now hopefully in heaven, didn't get that outcome. The system is a tough system. We want to help you get the best outcome. I hope that your attorney is doing the same thing for you, helping you understand all of it. But unit, team, and case management is frequently an area where people drop the ball. They go in there trying to make everybody understand why you're special and you shouldn't be there. And then what happens is you create this kind of friction where they're not helping you and they're actually making things hard for you. And if you start off on that foot, all the advocacy work becomes harder. I'm not going to say it becomes impossible, because whatever actions the system takes, I'm going to give you a reaction of something you can do. But we want you to start with the lowest possible sentence. And as soon as you get the lowest possible sentence, we want to say, okay, now here's what you do to navigate your way to the highest level of liberty at the soonest possible time. Every seed that you sow is crucial. Every interaction you have is crucial. It's why I'm asking you, during those first 30 days, I don't think it's a good idea for you to be approaching the warden, the associate warden, or any department head, telling them how they can run the prison system better. You need to expect there is going to be a lot of things that frustrate you. You need to expect there's going to be a lot of things that don't make sense to you. And you need to say, okay, I'm going to succeed anyway. And that starts with this whole idea of release planning. So you see under the release planning slide, I've got a few things about prison reform. I want you to understand all of those concepts first so that you know how to position yourself for each one. But I'm going to start off by saying these concepts of prison reform are very difficult for a non-lawyer, somebody who's not been in the system, to understand, okay? There's the Second Chance Act. There is the First Step Act. There is the CARES Act. There's now this 18-month rule. And there's this concept of executive clemency. If you're following along on the PowerPoint slides, I don't need to have them up there. I just use it to kind of guide me through that webinar. But through these different areas, you should understand these different concepts. And I'm going to give them to you right now briefly. We'll talk about them probably on every webinar, because I get feedback from so many people who just don't understand it, even the naming of it, right? There's the Second Chance Act, which passed in 2008, and it seems like it should be second, but then there's the First Step Act, which was passed in 2019. So the Second Chance Act is older. For you, what you need to know is that the main thing about the Second Chance Act that's going to apply to you is it provides the Bureau of Prisons with authorization to allow you to spend up to the last year of your sentence in what's called a residential reentry center, okay? The last year. Of that last year, you can spend, if your sentence is 5 years or longer, you can spend up to 6 months on home confinement. If your sentence is less than 6 months, 60 months, 5 years, you can only spend 10% of your sentence on home confinement. That's very important to understand in the Second Chance Act. Because it's important, because many people go in there and want to advocate or try and argue for something that the law does not allow. That's the Second Chance Act. The First Step Act override the Second Chance Act, okay? So the benefit of the Second Chance Act, just remember, 12 months in a home confinement in a residential reentry center is the maximum. And you've got to think the questions that you should be asking: what can I do to position myself to get the maximum? And we'll get to that a little bit later in this webinar. But that's the first step. 12 months maximum under Second Chance Act. That's not my rule. That's the law. Okay. That's the law that U.S. Congress passed and that President Bush signed. So that's the law. Home confinement, the law, I don't care. They don't have the authority to give you more than either 6 months if your sentence is 5 years or longer, or 10%. So that means if you have an 18-month sentence under the Second Chance Act, the most time you can get on home confinement is about 54, 55, 56 days. That's it. Try to remember that, okay? But the First Step Act overrides all of that. And that is very important to understand, because the First Step Act is a newer law than the Second Chance Act. Under the First Step Act, if your sentence, if you score a minimum or a low on the pattern score, and we'll get to that a little bit later, your risk assessment, and the Bureau of Prisons does a needs assessment on you, you are going to be called earned time credit eligible. That's going to be a category they put you in, a different track, okay? And this is probably a little bit different for you when you go in than it was for Scott. Because when Scott went in, they were still evolving this whole First Step Act stuff, but it's getting more advanced every week, every month. There's discussions going on about it. It's a huge piece of reform legislation, the biggest legislation change in 50 years. And I know that Sam Mangel is going to give us some feedback on what he learned this week about these changes. So the First Step Act, though, what it does is it overrides the Second Chance Act. It allows you to earn 1 year off of your sentence. However, that 1 year off of your sentence is going to be contingent on your sentence length. If your sentence release date is, if your sentence basically is 22 months or less, you can't get time off of your sentence right now. Now, our company is advocating to change that, but I can't tell you whether I'm going to be successful or not. I can only tell you right now, if you have a sentence of 22 months or less, you're not going to get time off of your sentence from the First Step Act. But you can work to get more time in home confinement or an RRC, okay? Very complicated. Remember, under the Second Chance Act, if you have an 18-month sentence, you cannot get more than 56 days in home confinement. But with the First Step Act, you can earn credits that you are supposed to be able to cash in and go home sooner. That's the First Step Act. The CARES Act is very different. The CARES Act allows a person to serve, depending on sentence length and time remaining to serve. You're eligible under the guidelines. Well, there's two things. You're eligible the day you get in there to go home confinement. The Bureau of Prisons has that discretion. Congress gave that discretion to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General gave that discretion to the Bureau of Prisons. And there are special circumstances, and they could let you out within a week. Are they going to do it? No, they're not. It has to be very special circumstances. But there are guidelines that say if you are within 18 months of your release date and you have served 25% of your sentence, they can tell you you're going to serve the rest of your sentence at home. Okay. So that's what happened to the guy that had 8 months. After 2 months, he had 25% of his sentence in. He was within 18 months of his release date. He's going to transfer to serve the rest of his time at home. Okay. If you have 5 years, okay, then after 2.5 years, you can apply for CARES and under the guidelines, because then it's 50%. If you serve 50% of your sentence, you could serve the rest of your time at home. I'm only telling you what can happen. I'm not telling you what will happen. I'm telling you what the law allows. And on the website, you can learn as much as you want to learn about the First Step Act and about these different memorandums. And I will show them to you. If you scroll down, in fact, I'll share my screen just so that you can see it. If you scroll down to the bottom of this page right here that's in the chat, you will see these different links, and you could learn about the pattern score. You could learn about the Spark 13, all of these things that I'm talking about, or that I will talk about before the end of this webinar. All of those links are right here already on this page. So it's very important, as I said, to use the Prison Professor's website as an asset. It is a tool. It is a tool that we create for members of our community to show you how do you advocate for yourself, okay? That is just, I consider that to be so crucial, because we'll get a lot of questions from people in prison. This is the time to ask questions as well. If I'm saying anything that says, I don't understand that, please raise your hand or unmute yourself. I can't teach you everything I learned in a quarter century of imprisonment in a single webinar, but I write every day, I produce every day, I make it as easy for you to absorb as possible through iTunes, YouTube, or on a spreadsheet or in articles, and then our team is always available to respond to your questions. But we have to help you understand you also have to do some work on your own and learn it. And while you're in there, your family should still be on these webinars and learn, and they should ask us questions if they have challenges, because we can't solve the problem. We can show you, here's the lever to pull. And we want to give you as much information as we can so that you're in a good position to get the benefit of the prison reform movement that's most applicable to you. And for some people, it's CARES Act. For some people, it's understanding the First Step Act and advocating for yourself. For other people, it might be understanding executive clemency. And how do I position myself for a commutation of sentence? Very long shot, okay? Very long shot. I have a lot of familiarity with that because I went through it 3 times, but it's difficult. I do think that times are better today than they were when I was in prison. But I think if you're wanting to position yourself for executive clemency, which is an extraordinary remedy, you've got to start thinking about that now. If you want to start positioning yourself for compassionate release, you got to start thinking about that now. And you've got to think about it from the concept of, what are the stakeholders going to say? What are they going to do? And you can't understand that if you can't move forward in a methodical way unless you understand the staff hierarchy, all the stakeholders of this system, okay? I know that your wife wants you home. I know that your family wants you home. That's not going to be a lot of relevant. That's not going to have a lot of relevance in the system, okay? What's going to have relevance in the system is, what kind of package have you created to make you the best possible candidate? Whether I'm choosing pursuit of Second Chance Act, First Step Act, CARES Act, I understand the 18-month rule. I understand what I can do. If your lawyer has not helped you understand all of that, we will. I am deeply passionate about helping people in our community, and I work at it, and I will work at it for the rest of my working years, because I know the system is bad, and I want to fix the system. Mostly, before I can fix the system, I've got to help people understand how to help themselves. So please do ask us questions, understand this release planning mechanism, and then let's scroll down the PowerPoint a little bit, and I'm going to talk about, well, if I told you don't interact with the unit manager, don't interact with the warden or the associate warden during your first time, what I do want you to understand, Well, who are you going to interact with? And one of those people is called your counselor. Okay. And I think that I have Brian on the website. Brian, Brian's one of our teammates. Brian, could you help the audience understand your relationship with your counselor? What did he do for you if you're there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
So
Tell
yeah,
the
so
audience what you did, how your relationship with the counselor.
I'll be honest. When I got to prison, I did not see my case manager for the first probably 45 days because we were still under COVID. But then once things improved, I started to meet with her probably every 60 days or so. And one thing that she had an open door policy, which was nice. And it probably had to do with the size of my camp. I think the size of the facility you're going to probably influences how available they are. But with that being said, yes, she always kept me up to date with everything that was going on. But at the same time, she made it very clear that that there wasn't anything she can do for me that was outside of what she was permitted to do. So I could ask for additional time. I can ask for halfway house time or home confinement time, but she was restricted to.
But that's the case manager. What about the counselor? Because the counselor, right? Typically, and that's okay if you don't. Maybe Brian didn't ever see his counselor. I wouldn't be surprised. Did you have any interactions with a counselor?
I had zero.
Okay. Thank you. Very clear. That's one thing I want to get. The counselor. Remember that you are on the webinar. Everybody's on the webinar. You hear about a counselor. You're going to expect, well, are they going to counsel me? Give me some guidance. Scott, could you tell us about your experience with the counselor?
Sure, just job change request forms and bunk change request forms. But like Brian said, they want very little to do with you, and they are the antithesis of what you would define a counselor as.
So the more you understand about these different roles in the Bureau of Prisons, then you could say, how do I pull these levers? Okay. And I can't give you a boilerplate strategy for doing time because I don't know a lot of things about you. I don't know, but our team will. Okay. I'm going to tell you the different reasons that I'm saying this. I don't know your education level. I don't know your business experience. I don't know your interest in teaching. I don't know your interest in leading groups. I don't know any of that. But if you want to teach in prison, sometimes it would be a counselor that offers that. Scott's right. Counselors are not going to counsel. They're going to process visiting lists. They're going to process where you sleep. They're going to process where you work. Okay. They're going to go through the housing unit and check on your unit sanitation. Did you make your bed? Make sure you make your bed in prison. Okay. Don't leave anything out of your locker. These are little things that screw people up. We just got a letter from somebody who went to prison, and she was only on one webinar before she surrendered, but she just had kind of an unpleasant experience. Either Larry or Justin, could you tell that story about the lady who got the disciplinary infraction? Justin or Larry?
All right, I can discuss it if you like.
Yeah.
So someone was new to the prison system. She had been in a few weeks, and she had a confusing situation. She had a call out to go to the medical for some kind of test. And that morning, she also had a commissary that she wanted to attend to. And she also wanted to go for breakfast. And she was going back and forth between medical and commissary because the medical personnel were not in the office at the time they were supposed to, which happens in prison more often than not. And by the time she got back, she was told by a bunch of people leaving that people weren't being attended to, but she didn't get the information necessarily firsthand. And as a result of her not being where she needed to be for that call out at the right time, it resulted in her receiving a disciplinary infraction that she's now dealing with. And nobody wants to be in that situation. Nobody. We have to that's part of the critical thinking that Michael talks about all the time, is yes, we all want commissary and the creature comforts, the small ones that we can get while we're in prison, but we need to use our critical thinking skills to determine, is that more important than me trying to maintain the ultimate goal of getting back to my family and my loved ones more quickly?
And also what has to be considered, it comes back to people who frequently tell us, excuse me, that they'll say, I don't really need to prepare for disciplinary infractions. I'm not going to get into trouble. I'm not going to use an iPhone and things like that. So there are very obvious things you won't do, but many of us never thought we'd get into trouble, and we went through an investigation. So it makes sense to prepare. So the question then, if God forbid something happens, what does the response look like? And the typical response from a situation like that is, I'm new to prison. I wasn't sure what to do. I got conflicting information. It's not my fault. And that kind of doubles down the prison's point of view, like, oh, here we go again, another person in prison blaming and not accepting responsibility. So if unfortunately disciplinary infraction happens, how do you respond? Michael's offered thoughts on that throughout the years. For example, if you've done it, Michael, perhaps you can, I know this isn't.
Well, I don't want to get on all disciplinary.
Okay,
I want
but the point to everyone watching is understand.
We got a whole webinar on disciplinary infractions,
Yeah.
on administrative remedy and
Yeah.
how to respond. And I don't want to get diverted
Okay.
from that. I only wanted to ask, the
Yeah.
reason I brought this up about a counselor and what happens is the counselor is going to put these things in called the call out. And what just happened to that lady, she didn't understand how important these things are. She didn't understand the unit management system. She didn't understand all the rules. She didn't do what we suggested in last week's webinar, was make sure that you read the what do you call it? The institutional handbook, and you master it. Because if you did that, you will see that you are responsible. They're going to hold you responsible for understanding the rules. And if you step over the line and it doesn't make sense to you, some of it's going to be illogical. If you understand the system, you understand the relevance of it. If our goal, number one, get home to our family as soon as possible. If our goal is to say, hey, let's rely upon our team, right? Larry and Sam and Justin and Clayton and Brian and everybody else to help you, you've got to understand, though the counselor is not there to help you. The counselor is there because he's got a government job and he can enhance his job by making things easier. If I want to lead a group, I might propose that to a counselor, and then all of a sudden I look kind of good to the counselor. If I'm the head orderly, I might make the counselor look good, right? These are things that I can do to enhance myself, but I am asking you to always be thinking about the system and how does the machine work and how do I work within the machine, and not making excuses for what I want. That's the counselor. No counseling, bunk changes, work details, visiting lists, and unit sanitation and groups. That's it. Don't go to him telling him, I've got problems at home, I've got mental health. This is a self-service plan, and we will be your team to motivate you while you're in prison. We will send you information. We will show you strategies. We will ask you to use those strategies to help yourself. But I need to start from the beginning. Don't make it harder for us to help you by getting a disciplinary infraction by not understanding the counselor had you go to 2 places at once. You've always got to be thinking about that because it's a big bureaucracy. And once you get targeted with that disciplinary infraction, it's much harder. In fact, in many ways, it almost becomes insurmountable to get relief through CARES Act or something else. So we want you to understand that. That's why it's so important. But the case manager, that's the next person on our list of our PowerPoint. The case manager is really important. The case manager, so all staff members, remember, always be courteous and kind, not judgmental. Never tell them how to do their job, okay? They are all better than you. Just accept that. You're an inmate, a felon, a criminal. Understand that's how they are going to see you while you're in there. Don't argue about it. Just try to be better. Humble. This is a full lesson in humility. And many of them will be patronizing and rude and not courteous, but you will always be courteous. That's important. The case manager can be kind. I mean, I've had many that were helpful to me. Your job is to make them your advocate. And that's why next week's webinar is so important, because we really get into details on the release plan. And the release plan is important. My goal for you, and I'll say this, I've said it in previous webinars, is during those first 30 days, when the policy says you're supposed to have your team meeting within 30 days, Brian didn't have it within 45 days. but that was because of COVID. That was an unusual era. The thing to do when you're first there, in my view, next week, we're going to have a full lesson on release plans. This week, I want to say, you want to go in there and say to them, done a lot of research before I came in here. I understand the importance of a release plan. I've taken the liberty of architecting a strategy to get me through my sentence. I know that there is a risk and needs assessment that I need to go through, and I'd like to get started on all of that right away. I want to participate in every class that can benefit me so that I can return to society as a law-abiding, contributing citizen. I'm here to make amends and do right. This is my initial plan, but I plan on I intend to document my journey every month and what I am doing, and I will be updating the unit team on my progress. When you do that, you're not asking for anything. All you're doing is making the case manager a star, and that's your goal. You want to be as easy as you possibly can be because she's got to do certain things. That's the First Step Act mandated that. She's got to put you through what's called a needs assessment. She's got to assess what do you need to do while you're in here? Anger management, parenting. I mean, there's so many these things. There's like 13 of these needs, and they're going to decide which ones are appropriate for you, even though you're going to say, I don't need that. No, you're going to say, I'm here to learn what you think is best because you're the professional and I'm here to do better. If that's your mindset, you're different from everybody else because everybody else is going to say, when can I get out on CARES? When can I get out today? And it's probably not the right time to ask that question during your first team meeting. During your first team meeting, all you want to do is be a compliant person who's not going to cause them problems. But on the bottom of this page, or the page that you will see when I send out the replay of this webinar, there are all of these links. My recommendation is that you read the Spark assessment because that's what the case manager is going to use. She has to say, put him through his risk assessment. He's done a pattern score and he comes up here, and these are the needs that we've identified for him. If you understand those, you're more fluent. That says, I prepared. I've taken this prison sentence seriously. I've learned about it before I got here, and I am ready to do what you think is best for me. And that's very powerful in building your own marketing strategy to get the best outcome that you could possibly get. That's what our goal is for you. Understand that your case manager is going to have to do these progress reports, okay? It depends on your sentence length. If your sentence length, and I think it's over 2 years, either they have to do these progress reports once a year, or in some cases, once a quarter, as you get closer to your release date. Make it easier for them by documenting everything that you are doing while you're in prison. Every book that you're reading, every course that you're completing, what you're learning on the job, how amazing the Bureau of Prisons is. Remember, this is a bureaucracy times 100. So if you understand that agency, you are going to understand, how do I advance my path? And during this era, when you've got opportunities like the First Step Act, the CARES Act, the Second Chance Act, and you can navigate things better for yourself, you've got to create your tools, tactics, and resources. This is not what I'm saying. This is what all of the subject matter experts that we have interviewed have said. And you could go on the website on the top, you will see under the resources, there's a link there that says subject matter experts, and you will hear from a chief probation officer. You will hear from a district court judge. You will hear from a former director of the Bureau of Prisons, a former warden, and the former leader of the halfway house. There's one, although they all say different things, and I would encourage you to watch those videos or listen to the audio files or read the content. I'm going to tell you, you will find one common theme. In this bureaucracy of criminal justice, they expect incremental change, okay? Your judge, theoretically, is supposed to know everything about you before he imposes sentence. So anything that exists in your life for sentencing, your case manager and your unit manager and your warden and the residential reentry manager, they're going to presume the judge already knew that, whatever existed before sentencing. Your job, if you haven't been sentenced, is to start now to get ready for sentencing. But remember, everything from sentencing going forward is all Bureau of Prison stuff. So you want to make sure that you've done things that the BOP considers successful, and you want to be making these incremental changes and documenting it, because that's what they are telling you they expect to see. That's how, if I'm a case manager, my career is going to get better if I'm helping you see, hey, you've got to work through these needs assessments. Learn how to balance your checkbook. So take the class. And what you want to say is you want to phrase it or write it out. Well, I took this class on balancing my checkbook, and I really learned a lot about not only balancing a checkbook, but the importance of documenting my life. And I mean, you've got to be always thinking creatively about how you make the BOP look good, because that's how you get home to your family sooner. Always remember that. And this is why it's a huge lesson in humility, because you're going to be on an advocacy campaign for the rest of this journey. In my view, I mean, I've been out of jail now, or out of prison now, for 9.5 years, and I'm still on this advocacy campaign because it never ends. Once you become a justice impacted person, what do I call that? Anybody that's gone through the system. Once you're in that arena, that bucket, you've got to be building a pathway that will lead you out, that will lead you into a different outcome than that poor fellow who's now dead is going through. You've got to be on a different outcome than the vast majority of people who go into this system and they find themselves either losing opportunities to get the best outcome while they're going through it, only because they didn't understand it, primarily because they didn't understand it. Second, when they come home, their career is off track. They can't get back to making money again. They are getting, they're depressed, or they're, substance abuse challenges or homelessness. I mean, there's a parade of horribles that follow for the vast majority of people that go through the criminal justice system. They're either unemployed or underemployed. They are struggling with banking issues and business issues and just getting out of the system. And it's challenging. And my job is to show you, you've got to learn how to advocate for yourself. And there's a lot of ways to do it. Most people you're going to find in prison, it's not fair. Congress said they couldn't do this. It's not my fault, right? That's going to be what you hear most of, okay? But I want you to be an engineer. I want you to visualize the best possible outcome at every stage here, getting to your family earliest. That's goal number one. Goal number two is probably recalibrating and putting this behind you and getting completely free and back on track with your business. But you've got to define success, and you've got to have yourself a plan. And then you've got to put your priorities in place. Priorities in place in the beginning, right now, is to understand this system. And we give you a lot of information that shows you how to do that. Ask questions if you don't understand, and then develop your tools, your tactics, and your resources that are going to help you advance your plan. And I've given you a lot of them. I will continue to give you those while you're in prison by sending it to you through the mail, and also by sending it to you through the Core Links email system. But you've got to execute this plan. And that plan has to be very methodical so that you're not falling off track, right? Like getting a disciplinary infraction, or failing to apply your financial responsibility plan, or whatever. You've got to go in there expecting there's going to be disappointment, okay? And say, I am going to get through this. There is going to be disappointment, but I am going to get through this, because if anybody else has gotten through it successfully, I can get through it successfully. But you've just got to realize the people that generally get through it successfully, it's because they are on a plan. They're not letting the system define them. They're saying, okay, I'm here. I know where I am. This is not going to emasculate me. It's not going to, take away my dignity. It's where I am today, but I'm going to use this to come out stronger. And that requires us to both be a couple of things: resilient on the one hand, okay, but also realistic on the other hand, okay? I've got to be resilient. I got to say, I know where I am going, but I've got to be realistic and say, I might be going into a system of corrections, but the longer I'm exposed to corrections, the more I'm designed to fail. I got to overcome it because there's nobody in there that's there to help you. That's just not how the system works. Nobody's career is going to be advanced because they're letting people out early. People are going to be advance their career if they advance the machine, okay? So CARES Act is not about getting you home to your family. It's about reducing the spread of the pandemic, and that means for staff and the community. And there is good news about that, for what might be bad for society. I'll share my screen with you, okay? And I write this now because I think I had a conversation with one member of our community whose husband is now in prison. I told her, hey, you've got to be thinking about this CARES Act thing. And there's a blog that I wrote yesterday right here that cites some resources of what does the CARES Act look like. So I would encourage you to watch the video, listen to the iTunes. I think the PDF, and this is the memorandum that you could see on the CARES Act right there. You could scroll through it and say, well, what was the purpose of this? And then you could see who wrote it, Hugh Hurwitz. He's on our subject matter experts. This is when he was the director of the Bureau of Prisons. But you could sit there and listen to him. And I had a conversation with him yesterday about the CARES Act. So you're going to want to scroll through this and make sure you understand it. These are those rules that I told you. Have served 50% of my sentence, or have 18 months or less remaining, and 25% or more of that sentence is already served. The more you understand about this, the better off you're going to be. But you also want to, where did I go? I wanted to go to all of these. Oh, I had all of these. You want to read this information here, because what the Bureau of Prison, what they're saying in the White House right now is that they're expecting another COVID surge in the winter. So starting right now. So if I were in prison, I would say I would never ask you to do anything that I didn't do. But if I were going into prison right now and I could fall into this category of being 25% in and 18 months to the door, or when I get 50%, I'd be building this pathway to take advantage of this news that's coming out, particularly if you've got a loved one in prison, because I always tell family members they should also be on the webinar. You want to bring it to attention. People are still getting out on CARES, and the winter is supposed to be heavier pandemic. You want to talk about health care for the community. You want to talk about health care for staff. You want to talk about your concern about being in prison because you can't follow the guidelines of the CDC or infectious disease experts. And for that reason, you qualify under that memo that I just showed you to get home early. The more you know, the better off you're going to be. The more you understand your unit team, the better off you're going to be. The more you understand the Bureau of Prisons, the more realistic you can be about what's happening. Be resilient, but also be realistic. Expect disappointment and always have a plan to get through that disappointment. That all starts, in my view, with a real understanding of the Bureau of Prisons itself. It requires you to have a solid advocacy plan. And that's what's going to be the topic of our webinar next week. Release plans. I know that one member of our community, and he's going to join us when he comes home, Joseph DiGregorio, has prepared his release plan. He did an excellent job working with our teammate Clayton. We want you to use these as models for what you need to do as you get ready for this difficult journey ahead. But it's a journey we are very confident you can make it through, and we definitely want to help you through that path. And that's really what I wanted to share today through today's webinar. And I'm going to ask now, this is our time for Q&A. And so if you have questions or you have something to share, other members of our community, if I left something out, let's discuss that. And I'm inviting you now to open your mics while I'm waiting for you to do that. Perhaps my team members may have something to share. I'm going to be reading through the chat. And I'll leave it to you guys to unmute yourself and talk if somebody wants to share something or has a question.
I have one thing to say before any questions. I think sometimes judges, the stakeholders may expect us to tell them what they want to hear. Some judges have said at sentencing, you're telling me what I want to hear. A case manager may feel that way if you just go in and tell them everything you're planned to do or you have done. So I think it's a good idea to try to nurture a relationship. So based on the length of your sentence, you may have a certain amount of meetings. So as Michael said, you go in unassuming, polite, you can lay out what you hope to do, and then you actually do it. And then you can share that with them the next time, which is different from what telling them what they may want to hear. And a lot of people may not actually do it. So you're just sort of nurturing a relationship with them, and you're either going to do what you say you have done or you haven't, but they kind of expect you to tell them what they want to hear. So just nurture that relationship, and then you have time to build that record. Michael talked about programming you're going through. What are you learning? That's what you'll share with them. And it's different than just telling them, you're actually showing them.
I see thanks, Justin.
Yeah.
I see a question interaction there that Sam just gave. And Sam, I'm going to give you a different perspective. That's as a response to Jody, who asks the question, can I make financial investments on behalf of my family member while they are incarcerated if I have power of attorney over their finances? And Sam wrote, if there's no order preventing you from investing on their behalf, you should be fine. However, you should also confirm this with your attorney. I'm going to give the opposite advice, okay? Don't ask your attorney because your attorney doesn't know anything about the Bureau of Prisons. I'm going to ask you, make sure you use Prison Professor's website and you learn a lot more about the Code of Disciplinary Infractions, and you take precautions before you do something like that. So, Jody, you could feel free to unmute yourself if you're comfortable to having a conversation with me, because that's a very important question. And I want to elaborate on why I say that. Are you there, Jody?
I am. Thank you.
So is this for you or is this for your loved one that's in prison?
It's actually for my son.
Okay. So let me walk you through this. The Bureau of Prisons has a series of disciplinary infractions, which we've covered in an earlier webinar, and there's a link to that on our website. But since you asked the questions, I'd like to just elaborate on a little bit. One of those disciplinary infractions states that you cannot run a business from prison. I'm not saying that your loved one is running a business. What I am saying is that a correctional officer who doesn't understand finance, who doesn't understand transactions, may hear about you making investments on behalf of somebody else, and they could very easily give a disciplinary infraction. And if you start with that pathway of saying, I'm just going to ask my attorney told me, the Bureau of Prisons will not care what your attorney said. So I can give you an example. If your son has not read Earning Freedom, I would really encourage him to do that, because I had that very same interaction and I wrote extensively about it. This is the kind of question that I'm talking about, and I applaud you for asking the question, Jody, because if you don't have depth and breadth of experience of this entire system, it doesn't make sense. Sure, it seems logical that you could make an investment on behalf of somebody else, but there's a process to do it. When I was in prison, perhaps in my 12th year, I wanted to make investments, and I asked the captain, is it okay if I make investments in the market? I want to, trade stocks and invest in this market. And the captain told me, no, you can't do that from my institution. And I gave him the same thing that you said. You said my family members while they're incarcerated. For me, what my response was, I've got a 45-year sentence. I'm going to get out of here. I want to prepare for my future. Can I invest? And he said to me, you should buy a mutual fund, because I won't allow you to do that from here. And if you make any trades over the phone, you're going to get a disciplinary infraction. And I didn't agree with that. And I said to him, well, I want to work with somebody else. What if I don't make the investment decision myself? I direct somebody else to do it. He said, as long as you don't make the call, like if you advise your family member to do it for you on their behalf, that's okay. you can't call a broker and tell him buy, 1,000 shares of Google. You've got to direct somebody else. So I said to you, I need to get that in writing, because if that's accurate, I want that in writing in my file. And I got it in writing. And then when I got it in writing from the captain, I got it in writing also from the regional council in the region, because I knew this is a controversial possible area where I could get shafted. And your son can get shafted if he does this. And I know many people that I was in prison with that knew I was trading, but I had the letter in my file. They did not. I got no fewer than 5 disciplinary infractions for trading stocks in prison, but I overcame every one of them. Why? Because I prepared. I had the letter in my file saying, before I made a single trade, I asked the captain and I asked the regional counsel. I've got it in writing. I'm protected. Other people that got disciplinary infractions for trading stocks from prison or telling their sister to trade stocks from prison did get a disciplinary infraction for running a business. I've known people who got disciplinary infractions in prison for telling their wife to transfer an account from savings to checking. It's very important to understand this and to not do something that can jeopardize your efforts to an earlier release date. So I want to just give you that perspective. I know that Sam had perspective of being in one camp and he probably never had that problem, but I'm telling you, there are potential for problems. That's one that a prison officer may say is running a business. Does that make sense, Jody?
Yes, it does. And that's why I wanted to ask you, because I know you've been in different levels. My son is actually in a low security. In disclosure, his is not a white collar crime. It was a criminal offense. And I also have a second question while I have you. Because of his crime, he is not eligible for FSA credits for good time credits. Mm-hmm. And on his individual needs assessment that he had done in January this year, he's only been in 16 months now.
How long is the sentence?
He will serve 5.92 years.
What is the sentence length, though?
8 years.
8 years. Okay. So that's helpful for me to give you some guidance going forward, but continue.
Okay. On his individualized needs plan from January of this year, under the current FSA assignments, they say he doesn't need anything. He doesn't need the trauma. He has a very low risk recidivism level. His frustration is he wants to take courses. He's not eligible to take courses. And right now where he's at, because of COVID, they've only in the 16 months offered 3 FSA classes, which one he's either not eligible for, or the ones that maybe he can take. He's in a place where there's 420 men. Let me just, they're getting to 2 years out.
Let me respond to these questions that you're bringing. Okay. And I have no doubt that your son is frustrated and he'd like to see something, but let's be a little bit clear here on the law. So he may not be eligible to earn the time credits, but the First Step Act applies to everybody in federal prison. And there are benefits that he can get. And that's why I asked you, what is his sentence length? It's 8 years. Okay. The question that he has to be asking himself is, am I waiting for the system to give me a pathway to advance that and improve my life? Or am I doing everything within my power to change something? Jody, is your son a member of our community, or are you just coming into the webinar? Do you know if have you worked with Sam and Justin and that team?
We've worked with Justin during the initial, sentencing and everything like that. Yes, but my son's
the reason I ask that is because did he get copies of the books, the books that we offer to members of our community? Do you know that?
No, he is not.
Okay, so I'm going to check on why. Maybe you have to send me an email to tell me his name separately, or you should visit the Prison Professor's website and go up there to resources and you will see our books and courses. And my recommendation is that you make sure that he gets those books. And the reason I'm saying that is because he has to learn that there are things he can do regardless of whether the Bureau of Prisons is offering courses or not. And whether he qualifies for earned time credits or not, he could still qualify for compassionate release. Every person in prison does. What does that mean? That means that the judge still has an opportunity. He has a mechanism that exists for him that didn't exist for me when I was in prison. He has a mechanism that he can try and go back to that judge and explain that he's not eligible for First Step Back credits, but he's had an extraordinary and compelling adjustment. And because of that adjustment, he would like the judge, because he's done so much that the judge possibly could not have considered when he sentenced him, then the judge has the discretion. Doesn't mean he's going to do it. When I was in prison, that law didn't even exist. It exists today. But if your son doesn't understand it, he doesn't know how to pull those levers and build a plan. And that's what I'd like him to see. I'd particularly like him to read Earning Freedom so he sees examples of how I had to do it. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Because if he doesn't see it and he's telling you what you told me, oh, they don't have classes here, oh, I don't qualify. He does qualify, okay? It's just a matter of saying, I've got to deal with the world as it exists. I can always work to advocate for myself. You'll see people on our website that had 200-year sentences or life sentences. And by what's on the paper, they don't qualify for anything, but they're now home. They got out. And I need to share more of that information and more of those stories. And our team needs to share more of those stories. So people that realize, hey, I've got to be resilient, but I also have to be realistic. I'm not going to wait for the system to change my life. I'm going to figure out, how do I create my tools, tactics, and resources to do it on my own? And that's what my history is about. And that's what I really believe. I'm not going to say it's easy. It's not easy for you. I know it's very hard for you to have a son in prison. But our job is to show him a path, and I hope that he will find that in our books and courses, okay?
Okay, excellent. I'll take a look today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And is there some other questions? Otherwise, I'll keep reading down this list. Or Justin, you may have something else to offer. Or Sam, or anybody else, Larry, or anybody.
No, I'm glad you touched on the trading of stocks, because I remember discussing that with you in custody. So thank you for doing that.
Attorney. Okay, I'm still reading it, but if I'm missing a question, I'm going through it right now, but there's a lot of them here. Just feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions at all, any stage in the journey. Okay, Bruce asked about the 10-month sentence with under care is 2.5 months. When did he put his application together? Prior to on one side, I can't imagine he showed up on day one with a request. Yes, he did, Bruce. He did work before because he was on all of our webinars and he learned. He's preparing is really understanding what's going on. How do I understand this system? And so I would consider that, yeah, that's part of the preparation. And he went in there with his documents prepared. He didn't submit them until he was eligible. So, but you're free to unmute yourself, Bruce, if you want to have a conversation about it.
Hey, Mike. No, I posted that, and then you kind of talked through that.
Okay. Okay, good.
I think
you're good.
Me and my family are on a really good line on what to prepare for.
I'm glad. Yeah, we just want to help you and make sure everybody's good. And I appreciate that you've got your answer, but I really encourage everybody here, look through the website, because I give a lot of examples, but it's like, if you don't spend the time reading it all, you won't know all of these things. And I just can't say it all. I got to get off at 10 o'clock today. I'm just letting you know, because I got an advocacy meeting at 10:30 I need to prepare for, but I'll be doing this again tomorrow. I want to make sure I respond to everybody's questions. So I saw yours. I wanted to ask Mike D. I see your hands up. Please feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I've been sentenced. I've got a self-surrender date of November 7th. The BOP has assigned me my prison number, but they've yet to identify the facility. There was a request put in during sentencing, judgment, et cetera, that identified a facility. I've been trying to be as proactive as possible to read the handbook of the proposed place that we identified, or that was identified in my judgment. At what point in time will that location be identified so I can make sure that I've got as much taken care of beforehand, visitors list, et cetera, prior to?
You could kind of do that now, the visitors list, Mike. Have you seen on our website where we kind of give,
Sure.
there's a page there on the visiting list. I'd encourage you to do that. I'd encourage you to send that to all of your potential prospective visitors now. Just have them have it ready. when you find out where you are, that way it's just ready to go in the mail and sent to them. I want to caution you though, there are some counselors that are responsible for preparing visiting lists, and they will only accept their visiting list. So they might put their name on it or something like that. Even if they've got it, you'll learn that when you get to the institution. It's also important that you know the policy. So your family members are immediate family. And as soon as you get there, as long as they're in your pre-sentence investigation report, they should be able to go, even if the visiting report is not done. So that's important to say. Where are you trying to go, by the way?
Schuylkill in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
What you could do, forgive the noise, this is what I did because I was never notified a pretrial services officer. I mentioned this last week. If you have your BOP number, my lawyer told me to call the marshal's office. I gave him my BOP number and they said, you've been designated to Taft Camp. So if you just Google United States Marshals in the district in which you were sentenced, I'll pick up, say, hello, my name is, my BOP number is this. Can you tell me if I've been designated? Because the designation may already be in, you're just not notified.
So you've got till November the 7th. That's relatively soon. I would be calling every day, trying to get through to the people in Grand Prairie. Do you know how to reach them, Mike?
I don't.
Okay. So I'm going to show you, for everybody should know. Let me just share my screen.
Michael, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts also, even before the BOP, of calling the marshals? Because oftentimes we'll call and you give them the BOP number, they'll give the designation. I guess try both.
Yeah, that's what you just said. Yeah, definitely try that. But I want to show you another thing.
Okay.
Here, go to bop.gov. And if you go to locations, list of our facilities, can you see my screen, Mike?
I can.
Yeah, go to list of our facilities, go to, well, I know it's in Texas, so I'm going to make it easy. Texas. And I want you to go to Grand Prairie right there. And on Grand Prairie, you're going to see this little number right here, email. That's BOP, CPD, DSC, policy correspondence, bop.gov. That's designation and sentence computation center. I would be writing them an email every day. Hey, this is my registration number. This is where I'm going. I don't have a designation on where to surrender. I'm supposed to go November 7th. Please help me. Send that to them 5 times a day until you respond. Ask your lawyer to write to them as well. And the marshals, as Justin said. But this is the time, that you can, this kind of gives you a real-time exposure of understanding they're not always so helpful in helping you plan. So be courteous and polite. You're never going to meet those people anyway. So if I were in your shoes, I would be emailing them every day. Okay. And have your wife do it as well. Say, we're trying to plan for our release plan and things of that sort, because that's what they want to see have done. Okay.
Honestly.
So I see Warner Portillo has a hand up, and I'm going to ask Justin to stay on because I've got to get on a call for some of our other advocacy work be ready at 10 o'clock. So Justin,
I'm on.
Yeah,
I'm
Warner, but let me respond to Warner first. Warner, could you unmute yourself?
Hey, Mike. So I just wanted to share what happened with me with the person that asked the question before. So I actually got a letter from the United States Marshal Service. So my turn-in date, turn myself in is this Monday. But I actually got the letter stating from Cumberland that I need to show up there literally on October 10th. So a week or a week and a half before, I'm assuming they send out the letter to you where you're going.
Yeah, I think that's the more normal way, and I hope that happens. Where are you going, Warner?
Cumberland,
Maryland. Did you connect with our community? Are you a member of our community?
Yes.
I'm waiting to hear back from Lance Charon, a client who served time at Cumberland. I did a YouTube video with. He'll respond. I'll be able to make the connection, but I expect to have that done more by Monday.
Okay.
Good.
Appreciate it.
All right. I appreciate everybody on the call. I'm going to have to drop off of the call because I've got an advocacy work. That's one of the, before I get off the call, I just do want to say to everybody, we've got a great team. We hire formerly incarcerated people to the best of our ability. And I'm really grateful to every member of our team. They generally, I defer to them on one-on-one stuff because I'm working on policy stuff. As an advocate, what I try and do is influence staff members in the BOP, wardens in the BOP, who would then influence regional directors in the BOP, who then influence the director in the BOP. And that's the way change gets made. I'm not the kind of advocate that's just always complaining and say it's not fair. And, everything's got to be methodical and engineered. And I hope that you will see that through Prison Professors. It's one of the reasons we publish every day. It's one of the reasons that I'm somewhat cautious and not criticizing it too much. It's because I'm trying to move the needle in a big way that influences everybody in prison. That's what I will be doing. That's my career and it's my passion. You can't go through a quarter century in prison without doing that. When it comes to helping individuals, I'm very confident that members of our team are great. And I hope that we're always prove worthy of the trust that you placed in us.